Call the regular meeting of the Audit Committee to order. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I would make right away a recommendation that we remove number 3, as the minutes for the last meeting are not available to be approved.
You might as well take 5, 6, and 7 off too.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, it says subject to finance director agreement. Has he agreed to address these issues?
I'm not ready to address them.
Will you comment on any of it at all, David, or not?
I will speak to number 5 briefly.
Okay, good. So if you're not able to do 5, 6, and 7, we take that off. We're left with public comments and review of the quarterly statement. Everybody okay with this?
As revised.
Okay.
No, hang on just a second. He said he was going to speak briefly to number 5, so 5's still on there.
David, let's leave it in so that, because of,
I just speak to, I would amend that, or recommend it be amended to acknowledge that the draft report's been received.
Margaret, you okay with that?
Yes, I got it.
I'm just curious why we're taking the other ones off.
David?
Number 6 is is the matters to is in the Board of Commissioners wheelhouse. That has not been assigned to the Audit Committee, and number 7 is I'm not ready to speak to that. I'm not prepared to speak to that.
So we'll never hear about number 6 unless it's assigned to us? Is that what we're saying?
It's my understanding from the guidance of the Board of Commissioners. Until that is amended, that's what my understanding is.
Okay, and number 7 has to do with... Sorry, I don't have the agenda. 7 and
It's like quarterly financial statements and a modified approval.
But it's tied to the other one, right? It's tied to... How does that compare to 4?
Are we going to talk about them? I just told you that I was not prepared to speak to them. Mr. Fletcher proposed this agenda subject to my agreement, and I've laid out that I'm not prepared to speak to them. If we're going to debate them, then it's on the agenda, and that's not subject to, I'm not agreeing to that. Okay? I'm not prepared to speak to it.
Okay, so we take number 3, 5, 6, and 7. 3, 6, and 7, and 5 we amend to just acknowledge that we have. Well, can you bring us up to date on the status of the audit?
I will. That's what I intend to do.
Okay, good. Okay,
I make a motion, we approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
all in favor?
All right.
Good public comments?
Yes, sir. I think all of you know who I am. I'm Dolly Mitchell, 132 Talking Drive. And I think you know what I'm going to say. Continually, the public is asked to attend meetings. I found out this morning about the email that was sent at 7:48 last night. I've known, I assume that the head of the committee is responsible for the agenda. And the town clerk, I've known for a good while, and she's competent, so I'm assuming that she sent it out as soon as she got it, or as soon as she could at that point. I went to the grocery store this morning at 9 o'clock and ran into a member of this committee and said, I will see you this afternoon at the meeting. And unfortunately, he had not read his emails. There needs to be publicity about this committee because there's some controversy out there about the committee and what's going on. every effort, I think, should be made to notify the public, to get the dates out that you're meeting. I will certainly have on my calendar the next time. And we're notified I sit on Parks and Rec, and we're notified well in advance of the meeting, and we pretty well know a week before if we don't have a quorum. That's all I got to say, but I want it on record. Somebody speaking from the public, because I am the only person from the public here today, and I don't think the commissioners can speak that are here. So, thank you. And I would be here longer, but I already had a previous meeting that I can't cancel, and I'll stay as long as I can, and then I'll leave. And I hope there's an audio of the meeting that eventually I can go to and listen.
The public comments, number 4, review of the 2019, September 2019 quarterly budget to actual financial report dated.
I just handed out a one-sheeter there for you, and it's basically a macro roll-up of the budget to actual by fund. I know that previously the board had made a proposal, or had Mr. Schiavone had made a proposal that organized a report in a different format, and that hasn't gotten through to the commissioners yet for one reason or another. So, in light and in lack of that being the approved format, I've defaulted to just a macro where we are, and pretty much as you whether or not you find utility in it, I will use the by fund to point out a couple of things. I think that it really illustrates how the cyclical nature of the town's finances work. We've got it by fund, and there's budget actual and an encumbrance column, and it shows the delta between the actual revenues and the actual expenses plus the encumbrances. And for example, the boxes, the numbers that have the boxes around it, that's the net position of that fund. So, for example, the general fund, we're deficit spending to the tune of about $480,000, and that's to be expected because we haven't received the lion's share of the tax revenues yet. Then the sewer capital reserve, all three of the capital reserve funds, those transactions specifically for the water and sewer capital reserve funds, we haven't collected cash for those yet and haven't moved those funds into the capital reserve accounts. For the beach renourishment and inlet maintenance capital reserve fund, which is one up from the bottom, that's really just an interest entry there. The capital reserve funds, we haven't made that entry to show the $3 million plus that's in there yet. This is the second year for all three of those capital reserve funds, and so we're being very deliberate with how we portray that. I expect that that'll be a mid-year moving of money into those funds, which would be by journal entry. But continuing on with how the operations flow, of course, the general fund, we're deficit spending about $480,000 there, and likewise for the water and sewer fund, we've deficit spent about $380,000, and primarily what that is because we just paid a big sewer debt payment on that. So we'll continue to the steady state of revenues and operational expenses is, that's fairly static, but it is cyclical. But specific reason was like, oh my gosh, $400,000 in the hole in water. You gotta remember that we pay debt service on the sewer system from there. So that's what's happening, going on
What's
today.
the other boost though in the general dynamic of both revenue and expense? Because if you annualized, even without that, you know,
You've got to forget about annualizing because it's so, we sell.
understand that, but what's the big sporadic revenue in water and sewer? What's the big?
1 million gallons a day over July 4th and those holiday weekends for water and sewer.
I understand, but that's this period. In other words, I'm just trying to relate the 830 to the 5.7 million cost, the budget. I'm trying to understand.
The primary delta there is you got to remember that we're running a $1.5 million capital improvement for the lift station
Okay.
upgrade. That's in there also, but those expenses haven't been encountered yet, nor has the fund balance for that project been.
Okay, so that fund balance is coming from outside. Okay.
It's unobligated funds.
So that aluminum tax of $3,183.33
Where are you, John?
on the second line of not your sheet, not the mega sheet, the individual list, just the second line down, I'm just sort of caught off guard.
Yeah, that's we've only collected $3,000
You know whose that
and
is?
what? No, I probably.
I think it's mine.
Okay, all right. You got me.
Mine's
Yeah.
paid by the mortgage.
Yeah.
The
We
mortgage
love
company- The mortgage company told me they paid it.
Already for next?
Oh, yeah, when I give it in, it's
Okay.
paid, they take it, they pay it. So my guess,
we love prepayments, right?
So just so you know that I'm paying my taxes.
Okay. I'm sure Margaret will remind me if you don't. But the B part fund, that's probably, because you got to remember all this stuff is piled into a central depository, central collection point. And so the B part fund, you know, we've collected the lion's share of the B part of the occupancy taxes now, so we're about $1 million ahead there, $998,000. When you scrub all those numbers, you know, together, and you discount the transfers between funds, we're about $130,000 to the black. So that's the mega sheet. I like that term. I hadn't heard it.
That revenue includes the money that you're transferring from the general fund for the tax.
Right, but it hasn't been appropriated yet, so it's not there. Just that's in the budget column. Whenever it
Yeah,
hits
budget
that,
column, right,
right, that's correct. You'll see it both places when it's appropriated in the general fund, then when it's expensed, and then it'll hit the revenue line for the reserve fund that it's deposited into.
Did you tell me before that the local people who are managing rentals pay within a week or so afterwards, or not? Was that right?
There's Margaret. What's that time? It's the
They have to pay by the 15th of the following month.
15th, so you got 2 weeks to get it.
There's a 1 month lag then. In
Yeah.
terms of revenues are a month out of pay.
Right.
Right.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. So those are you know some of the highlights. And again, our water sewer revenues straddle the fiscal year because we have Memorial Day in the previous fiscal year. So it's a double helix on our cycles for revenues.
So overall, your position, I mean, anything that the town's going to be concerned about, or the board needs to be concerned about in terms of what we thought we're going to get, what we're really going to get?
Well, we're always concerned. We're always concerned.
I know
But,
you
you
do,
know,
but is there anything that you know of now that's likely going to be a surprise, or overspend or underspend, or come back and ask for money?
It's early in the year. What I will direct your attention to in the general fund, and this is probably as good a litmus test, the occupancy tax revenues, of course, that's been inching up incrementally on a positive glide slope now for some time, not just this year. But if you look at your first page in the general fund, the last 6-7 lines, which is the construction-related items, building permits, camo zoning, electrical, mechanical. Those were, this was September, so July, August, September. We're about a third into the year, and all of those permits are holding about a third of,
So this is as of 9:30.
yeah.
We're a
so-
fourth of the way in, but you're
That's what I
counting
mean.
the third.
Okay.
So you're,
Yeah, that's what I
you're
mean.
ahead.
Well, yeah, and you
As
can
of right now.
expect normally the warmer months, you get a little bit more construction-related permitting charges in there, and then it tails off. So that's probably about right as far as, our construction-related.
So the 4 months in the winter time is expected to be less than.
Yeah, what we hope is that we hit about 50%, come the turn of the new year with that. And then you'll probably have a couple, 3 months of lean, and then it'll pick up in the spring, because that's what, the favorable weather, the contractors try to pull those permits late February, March timeframe in order to capitalize on the next 6-8 months of hopefully good weather. But
Is this about where we were last year this time?
well, I mean, I'll say yeah, but I don't have, we didn't do that proposed comparison chart as initially recommended to the board of commissioners for their okay on it. We pulled that back. So I would say yes. There's nothing that strikes me as being horribly different this year than we have in the last couple of years. Anytime that you have a no hit on storms, or you only get delayed by a week or two, that's a good thing. And we've been real fortunate here the last couple, 3 years, have been able to get the island, get it back and running, get up and running after those storms, albeit an inconvenience to people. We've still got a wide beach out there, and it's a draw. But beyond that, if you got any specific questions on any of those, either revenues or expenses, I will say that for expenses related to personnel, we blew a bunch of overtime on the storm, and as always, that inflates our salary lines and all the cabbage lines that go along with that. Since Dorian has been, a federal declaration, we'll be eligible for reimbursements. But if you're trying to do a hard count we're a fourth way through on the fiscal year, the salary should be about 25%. They're probably going to be more than that, just specifically because of the impacts on having to run people more than the normal schedule.
But you're budgeting for the overtime normally.
Yeah, but
You just didn't budget enough.
we just budget normal overtime, and whenever you do those extended hours, it gets awry and quickly. But where we've been successful in the past is recouping those reimbursements. It may take 3 or 4 months, and sometimes it takes 6 months. But the bad part of that story is we've become fairly adept at the FEMA process now. So we think we've become fairly adept at it. So we've had our initial meetings on Dorian, and the state got its declaration. There's been a federal declaration, and then it's a process that we'll go through.
Is that gonna hit more than just payroll, or will it hit?
There are some other, I call them the getting ready expenses, I think we've expensed some against the hurricane preparedness lines, and there's probably some expenses that we had to source generators, that kind of thing from, that'll be in the operational lines, whether it's water or over in the the Fund 10 side. But again, those will be recaptured and stuffed back into the budget once we get them qualified for reimbursement.
I just had a question about generally your latitude in administering this budget. As I recall, a line item can be over budget by up to, what triggers you going to the commissioners with a budget adjustment? And is there a underlying process that you, for example, do you say I have a chance to offset this with something else in that same category?
No, pretty much it's unlimited between lines, but in the same fund.
Okay.
But if it has to be between funds or it increases the budget overall, the commissioners have to weigh in on
Okay.
that. The commissioners either have to approve a budget amendment and appropriate more funds, or as may be the case, to transfer money between funds, which you really can't do from the enterprise funds unless there's special circumstances, but that's pretty much the answer
Well,
to that.
maybe as specific, and I apologize if you've covered this already. I haven't attended the commissioners meeting, the last couple of meetings, but as I recall, we selected an audit firm that was probably higher than the budget. Were you able to offset that, or did you have to take that, or was there sufficient room in that line to accommodate that higher fee?
Well, that gets into programming of, I can't remember if we did a budget amendment for that or not. You got me on that.
Okay.
But
But that would be an example of how you would apply.
Yeah, and in the professional services line that's attributed to the governing body, normally we've bubble budgeted for based on a historical trend. If you spend $30,000 a year in legal fees, most likely you're going to spend $30,000 more, unless you've got a case going
Central
on.
Reach.
A case. And those are projectable variable costs, so you know about how much you're going to do. In the case of the contract with that auditor, I believe we actually had to do a budget amendment because of that very fact that
Thought you did.
that we had. Previously it was 15 grand. That's what we had budgeted. The new one was 30 grand. We knew that we normally spent $30,000 in legal fees, and I think my quote was, we're going to have to amend the budget because I can't, and those are rough numbers. I can pull the actual budget amendment, but as my
Within
memory.
the general fund, you could have taken that from another line if you had it, if you had freedom in another line, underspend another line.
Yes. But-
It seemed like there was talk too about a budget amendment to pay RSM $900. I mean, we didn't do it, but it seemed like there was some discussion about that.
No, that wasn't. That was because it was it hadn't been pre-audited. That expense had not been pre-audited. Okay. Whenever you have a contract, before you can obligate the town to paying that contract, it has to be certified by the finance officer that there are funds sufficient for the obligation. We had a contract with them for $20,000 that had been pre-audited, and oh, by the way, approved by the board, and oh, by the way, approved by the local government commission. and the bill we got was in excess of the pre-audited approved contract. So that's a separate issue in and of itself.
But RSM withdrew the contract.
No, I know, I just, because I mean, we went over on the sewer and some others, I'm just trying to understand when we go through that process and not. 'Cause
Well, wait a minute. We went over on the sewer. Would you care to qualify that?
Well, it seemed like we had to come back for another $300,000 or something, I mean, this was last year.
But
Because of the-
before there was an obligation or a contract entered into, you have to appropriate the funds. Okay, that's what that was done. That was the, if memory serves me, that was the skid assembly that the town had to procure for the upgrade of the system. Before that system could be procured, the Board of Commissioners had to set another stack of chips on the table in order to buy it. So that was an instance of where the budget had to be amended because the budget increased. But there was not an expense made that went over. In that case that we're talking about, there was an expense made on behalf of the contractor that the board had neither approved, the local government commission hadn't approved, and the finance officer hadn't certified sufficiency of funds available to pay the obligation. That's part of the system of internal controls. Part of the system of internal controls is to make sure you got money.
So was it a timing issue then?
It wasn't done right, is what the issue was.
I mean, basically, they said they would charge X, and they came back and wanted to charge more than X, right?
That's correct.
Well, okay.
Same thing in the corporate world, if I got a contract with a vendor.
No, I understand, it just seems like we paid more for the sewer than we planned, and it seemed like it was a different process.
No.
That's not true?
No.
It's-
We may have ended up paying more than was initially estimated and programmed and had to appropriate additional funds for it, but the obligation and the work was not fulfilled before the agreement was consummated.
Are we under the same controls of the federal government, that if you did that, it simply can't be paid?
Well,
Federal government, if you spend more money than you obligated.
the local government,
You're gonna eat it.
159, the local government commission says that you can't make an expenditure without having a pre-audit certificate. So if a contractor does something for you, he's basically done
And
it.
that doesn't preclude anybody from trying to amend a contract prior to rendering additional services or
That's
other
correct.
things like
It
that.
does not. It does not preclude somebody from doing that. And that happens all the time.
And that's
You know,
what
I mean,
will probably happen.
yeah.
in the
Yeah,
case
they
of-
did
You
the
see-
work, and didn't ask the.
I mean, whenever you build a building, there's, notorious. The
Now,
government is notorious for doing change orders, and that's what that is. There is a process in place to make sure that the change orders are accommodated.
now do they allow, it's not uncommon for professional services to include plus reasonable travel expenses and the like as an addition to the contract. Are you allowed to accommodate that as part of this?
Well, those agreements normally specify what that is. The attorney that we actually had recently had travel and expenses in there, and that's pretty standard. Yeah.
Without even enumerating a cap on that or anything, or is it just reasonable?
Most of the agreements articulate what those are, and whenever the bills come in, they'll say, 53 miles for driving to Charlotte, back to Wilmington, that kind of thing. Or, it's totally within the finance officer's remit to question those.
Any questions?
You want me to comment on where the audit is?
You can switch to number 4 and just, or number 4, number 5. Give us a,
Yeah,
up to speed on where we are.
we've received, the financial statements are complete. We've received the draft audit from Rives and Associates and got that yesterday at 10:30 in the morning and are working through some of the errors and omissions that drafts normally have in them. There are a couple of items that we need to dialogue with Jay on. We sent them some stuff and evidently they've missed it, but I believe we're in pretty good shape.
Did he give you any indication as to whether or not we can make it by November the 1st?
That's his intent, although he has been waffling a bit with bringing it to our attention that the local government commission's templates for the financial statements and the MD&A just got released yesterday too. So I really don't think there's that much difference in the template. But I haven't done this new template yet either, so.
And how will you do the MD&A this year? Will you do that, or you hired by an outsider?
I've augmented, we've brought in some augmentee assistance to help. That's done under my pen, but we'll have some help with that.
That's still the same, Lithia Brooks. Is she available now to do this?
Yep.
So you're comfortable you can get it done by November the 1st?
Well, I'll put it to you this way. We're working on it just as hard as we can.
And we will expect to call a special meeting of the audit committee when it is done, that the audit committee can see it before it goes to the LGC.
Now, I believe that the actual draft is submitted, the financial statements. This is Jay's wheelhouse, and I certainly don't want to speak erroneously for him. But I think that there is, and the process is squirrely, y'all, but it was my understanding that once he got something suitable that could go forward, and the local government commission could start eyeballing it get in the hopper to be counted as, it's sequenced, it's received, that was his intent. I would defer to his specific guidance on that. I think that, with time being the essence, that the important thing is for whatever it is we need to do in order to make the audit not be late, that would be a most wonderful and splendiferous occurrence.
So other than the MBA, are there other big things that need to be done before, what do we have, 3 weeks till it's due?
I've got to review the draft of the financial statements. Yeah.
Okay,
It's 77 pages.
okay, and develop, I'm just trying to get a feel for 3 weeks out, what's left on our plate to get done.
You just have to review it.
And write the MBA though. Okay. And findings wise, where does it stand?
Part of the report says that there's no findings, and part of the report says there is findings. So that's part of my review of the findings of the report. So, yes, there's going to be findings. Look for them to be the same findings that you had last year.
The same findings as last year?
Yeah.
Last year was one significant deficiency, one material weakness.
Or similar.
When he was here, last time he was here, he was saying there were 2 significant deficiencies. So is it still a significant deficiency, or did it turn into a material weakness?
If whichever one is the worst, it's been downgraded, but they're the same findings.
Downgraded, I mean worse. It's a material weakness?
What?
Is that,
No. Material weakness is more serious than a
serious.
significant
Yeah, that's what
So
I'm
there
trying to find out.
There was one bad and one real bad, and the real bad one's been downgraded to
So there's
bad.
two
It's
significant
It's
deficiencies.
my
There's two
understanding.
significant deficiencies. There's no material weakness. Is that correct?
That was my understanding.
Based
of
on the
reading
draft that you got
draft
yesterday?
and his report at the last meeting.
So based on the draft you received yesterday, there was no material weakness on it?
That's my understanding. I haven't read all the way through it. Again, Tom, the first page in the report says there's no weaknesses whatsoever. So there's a dichotomy of what I'm getting in the report. Okay? It's a draft report.
It does not say there's a material weakness. Is that correct?
Tom, I got it yesterday. I
Okay.
just said I hadn't read all the way
All
through
right,
it.
just checking.
And it's probably at the first read, it's gonna be enough.
Yeah, I did read the page that said there aren't any weaknesses, and then I went, yeah, okay, and then flip through it and then go to the back and it goes, okay, well, there's not only are there some here, but there's some add-ons too. But
So it's a unmodified opinion, basically, then it's a.
that's my understanding. Yeah.
Okay,
But
anything else?
Rich, Tom, verify for me, a unmodified opinion is the absolute best you can get, right?
That's the best you can
That's
get.
right.
Yes,
Saying
that
the
is
financials
correct.
are good.
Yeah.
That's
When
correct.
they're done, the financials.
Without any blemishes or deficiencies at all would even be yeah, that doesn't affect the quality of the audit itself, but now that's more of a reference to just the process.
Yeah, one is the statements themselves,
Yes.
and the other one is the processes that
Yes.
are deployed to come up with the statements.
Before Sarbanes-Oxley,
Everything's good.
Anything else?
No.
You guys get a motion to adjourn?
I want just to double check. I've noticed on my calendar that we are scheduled to meet January the 11th at 1 o'clock.
As this one was also noticed in our schedule, we had
Yeah,
four.
although,
We would do a better job on getting that schedule published, y'all. I mean,
And I thought Heather was doing it, and she tells me she doesn't do it.
for my sake of, for future candidates that are looking to join the committee too, I would prefer that we establish, and if Friday's the right date, I guess, that we set this, it'd be the second Friday at
Oh, we
1
did.
o'clock.
we did.
We did.
It
In
is.
March, we
They're on
agreed
the-
to the
they're on the
schedule.
Well, there was one meeting that wasn't on a Friday though that I thought.
Oh, a special, if you have a special, like the
No.
auditor, we met with the
No,
auditor.
okay, so the meetings are regularly
We have
scheduled.
4 regular scheduled meetings. By definition, the board required us that we put 4, and we did. We identified them, and it's like the week after the end of the quarter.
Okay.
But
When I read the summary of that, there were just 4 dates listed there, and it didn't refer to it as, like in other notes, the
second,
like
The third Friday.
the second
Yeah.
Friday, and maybe if, just as a formality then, if that's what we've all agreed to, we probably need to get it in our minutes
I
sometime.
did, and it was published.
Well, I think what he said in March. I think
Whoever
March,
published those minutes didn't say it was the second Friday of
they did
April.
list it.
It listed 4 dates that I went in and put in my
And he
calendar.
wants it to say
And it-
the second Friday of the month or whatever.
Yeah, just as a clarity, it turns out that,
if you and I deconflict that, how about if you and I deconflict that, maybe at the next board meeting, we can make sure that it's clear.
Yeah, well, and
Well, yeah,
we're gonna have an election between the now and the next one, so.
okay. Administratively,
in
I'll make
terms
a
of
note
audit
here.
committee members are annual, January through,
As of now,
January to January.
as of now, I
appointed in December then, is the appointed
appointed December. And it's possible that the board, depending who the new board is, would decide to make it 2 years or 3 years, and rotating, that would be the smart thing, not to have a chance to lose everybody in one period. Okay, we're good?
I moved to adjourn.
In favor? We are adjourned.